My son sent me to prison for 2 years. He told the world I caused his wife's miscarriage with stress and greed. Every month they came to visit. I refused to see them. The day of my release was the very day they lost everything. My name is Arthur Lane. I am 58 years old. I built Lane Logistics with my late wife Helen from one truck and a stubborn refusal to cheat people. This is a drama story about blood, betrayal, and patience that outlasted a cell. If you have ever been punished for someone else's sin because you were convenient, stay with me. If you have ever sat under lights that hum and counted days by meals, this is also for you. Brent is my only son. Charming from childhood, the kind of boy teachers forgive and banks should not. Helen used to say, "Arthur, charm is a tool. Teach him what it is for." I taught him freight lanes and handshakes. I did not teach him enough about consequence. When Helen died, something in Brent loosened. Grief can make people holy or hungry. He became hungry in a suit. He married Sloane, a woman who cried beautifully and kept score privately. They wanted a baby. They lost a pregnancy in the second trimester. The grief was real. I do not deny real grief. What I deny is the story Brent built on top of it. He told relatives I had pressured him to expand the company too fast, that my calls and my standards and my refusal to hand him full control had crushed Sloane with stress. He told a version where I was a tyrant father who valued pallets over people. Some of that version used true bricks. I am not a soft man. I push. I push hard. But the house he built was a lie with a nursery painted inside it. What Brent needed was not a villain for a miscarriage. He needed me gone long enough to move money. Lane Logistics had a credit line secured by equipment and by my personal guarantee. Brent, as COO, had access he should have used like a steward. Instead, he created vendor invoices to shell companies, small at first, then braver. When the numbers started to stink, he needed a narrative and a body. The narrative was my alleged financial misconduct and emotional abuse of the family. The body was mine. I was arrested on a Wednesday outside the warehouse. Employees watched. Shame is a public sport. The affidavit used documents I had not signed, signatures close enough for a rushed judge and a tired system. My lawyer said, "We will fight. Fighting takes time. Time is what Brent bought. I will not drag you through every hearing. I will tell you this, I could have taken a deal that painted me partly guilty for a shorter sentence. I refused. Helen did not raise me, or him, for clean lies. The first night in custody, I stared at a ceiling that did not care about my name on the side of trucks. I whispered Helen's name like a password. I promised her I would not sell the truth for comfort. Prison is noise and metal and the long education of waiting. I worked in the kitchen. I read until my eyes burned. I wrote letters to Helen I could not send and burned them in my mind. Every month, visitation lists included Brent and Sloane. Every month I refused. The guards thought I was proud. I was protecting the last clean boundary I had. If I sat across from him under fluorescent light, he would perform remorse for an audience of plastic chairs. I would not be his stage. A man named Diaz in the bunk near me said, "Refusing visits is how you stay sane or how you go crazy. Which is it?" I said, "It is how I remember who started this. There is a day in month 11 I need you to know about." A chaplain asked why I refused my own son. I said, "Because visits are how he turns me into a prop in his redemption." The chaplain said forgiveness is freedom. I said, "Freedom is also not licking the boot that kicked you until a court finishes its work." He did not like that answer. I did not need him to. I marked weeks in a small notebook, then recopied them so no one could steal my sense of time. I memorized Helen's recipes in order. Bread. Stew. The lemon cake she made when Brent was small and still collectible as a human. Memory was my gym. I also studied my own company from memory, every lane, every weak joint in the process, every place a dishonest COO could bleed value. If I ever walked out, I would not walk out stupid. What Brent did not know was that Helen and I had built a second structure years earlier, quiet on purpose. A holding company owned critical equipment leases. A voting trust held my shares with instructions that activated under criminal duress or incapacity. Mr. Patel, our corporate counsel, is a man who looks bored while being dangerous to thieves. When I was arrested, Patel did not give press conferences. He audited. Slow. Precise. Months of bank subpoenas, metadata, vendor addresses that resolved to mailboxes, transfers that landed near Brent's new boat. Sloane's name appeared less than Brent's. I noticed that for honesty. This story is not a crusade against a grieving mother. It is a ledger. By month 14, Patel had a civil case that would not free me yet but would cage the money. By month 20, prosecutors who had liked Brent's clean haircut began to dislike his spreadsheets. My criminal appeal found the forged signature expert who finally said what I knew: the hand was not mine. I am not pretending the system is a hero. The system is a machine. Machines can be fed better evidence. When Patel's letters started arriving through counsel, I read them twice and then did push-ups in a corner like a man half my age and twice as angry, which is to say, exactly angry enough to stay controlled. Hope is dangerous in a place like that. I treated hope like a sharp tool, useful, not for play. I reread Helen's old notes from our first year of business, grocery lists mixed with lane prices. It reminded me that empires begin as ordinary days. 2 years. Release day. Gray dawn. Clothes that smelled like a locker. Patel picked me up in a quiet car and handed me a folder before he handed me coffee. Arthur, he said, do not celebrate yet. Read. Inside, freezing orders on Brent's accounts. Court judgment on the civil fraud. Bank notice of default on the credit line Brent had personally reshaped without authority. A lien package on the house he bought with money that was never fully his. And a letter from a buyer interested in the legitimate core of Lane Logistics, the part still clean, the part Helen would recognize. Brent lost the company the way he took it, on paper, in daylight, with no need for my hands on his throat. Sloane filed for divorce within a month. I do not cheer. I observe. Brent asked for a meeting. I refused for 30 more days. Then I agreed to 30 minutes in Patel's office, recorded, with counsel. He cried. Some tears were real. Real tears can coexist with real theft. Dad, he said, I was drowning. The baby. The pressure. I made it about you because I could not stand it being about me. I said, you made it about me with handcuffs. He said, tell me how to fix it. I said, you fix what the court orders. You tell the truth on record. You never use a pregnancy loss as a weapon again. And you do not get my forgiveness on a schedule that comforts you. I left him with that. Forgiveness may come. It will not be a prize for his impatience. I live now in a smaller house near the water Helen loved. I consult for the logistics buyer on contract, clean work, daylight hours. I visit Helen's grave and tell her the equipment lease is held. She would care about that more than revenge poetry. Some mornings I wake and still listen for a lock that is not there. Freedom has an echo. You learn to live with it. I do not tell strangers my prison number. I tell them my company's old motto, deliver what you promised. Brent promised blood loyalty and delivered handcuffs. The market, eventually, noticed. People want a movie ending where the son is destroyed and the father laughs. I did not laugh on release day. I sat in Patel's car and shook because freedom feels like too much sky at first. Then I read the folder again and understood, patience is a kind of power that does not need to raise its voice. If your own blood frames you, hear me. Do not perform the reconciliation they need for their reputation. Document. Hire boring, dangerous lawyers. Refuse visits if visits are theater. And let the day of your release be the day the truth arrives with stamps and seals. I need you to understand the texture of refusal, month after month. Month 1, refusal felt like rage. Month 6, refusal felt like diet. Month 12, refusal felt like religion. Month 22, refusal felt like the only clean shirt I still owned. Brent sent letters. I returned them unopened until Patel said open for evidence. Inside, justifications, scripture quoted like a shield, a photo of a nursery that made my stomach turn for reasons that had nothing to do with paint color. I gave the letters to counsel. I did not give Brent my face. Sloane came once alone. I refused her too. Not because I believe she designed the forgery. Because the story that put me in cuffs used her grief as a billboard, and I would not become a second billboard for anyone's healing schedule. In the kitchen, a young inmate asked what I was in for. I said, for believing blood would not steal. He laughed without joy. Yeah, he said. That will do it. When the signature expert finally testified on appeal, I was not in the room. I was mopping a floor and learning that justice can sound like a wet mop and still be real. Patel's letter arrived 2 days later with a sentence underlined, "We are close." Close is a word that can kill you if you hold it wrong. I held it like a tool. Let me take you inside a single ordinary prison day, so the 2 years do not become a montage that lies. Wake before light. Count. Move. Kitchen shift. Steam in metal trays and the smell of food that is calories without comfort. I learned who stole sugar and who shared bread. Human nature does not pause for your case number. In the yard I walked the same loop and named freight cities under my breath. Memphis. Louisville. Omaha. Helen and I had run those lanes when our truck was a prayer with tires. Remembering work kept me from becoming only a wound. Letters from old employees arrived through counsel. Some believed me. Some did not. I did not campaign. Campaigns are for people who need a crowd to know they exist. Patel visited when allowed. He spoke in numbers. Numbers were love in his dialect. He said Brent bought a boat. I said, of course he did. Thieves like horizontal status. He said the civil freeze is coming. I said, then I can wait without rotting. There was a night I almost requested the visit, not for Brent, for the child I remembered at 6 holding a toy truck. I wrote the request and tore it up. The 6-year-old is not the man who cuffed me with paper. I will not let nostalgia launder a crime. When the appeal turned, I did not cheer in the unit. Cheering makes you a target and a story. I sat on my bunk and breathed like Helen taught me before board meetings, in for 4, hold, out for 6. Then I wrote one line in the notebook, Helen, the hand was not mine, and now a machine agrees. Release day clothes feel like costumes at first. The air outside smelled like wet asphalt and freedom and fear. Patel's folder was heavier than the duffel. I asked him to drive past the old warehouse. The sign still said Lane. For a minute I hated my own name on metal. Then I decided the name could be cleaned. Names are not the same as the people who stain them. Brent's loss did not restore my years. Nothing restores years. It restored the record. Sometimes the record is the only resurrection available. Let me take you inside a single ordinary prison day, so the 2 years do not become a montage that lies. Wake before light. Count. Move. Kitchen shift. Steam in metal trays and the smell of food that is calories without comfort. I learned who stole sugar and who shared bread. Human nature does not pause for your case number. In the yard I walked the same loop and named freight cities under my breath. Memphis. Louisville. Omaha. Helen and I had run those lanes when our truck was a prayer with tires. Remembering work kept me from becoming only a wound. Letters from old employees arrived through council. Some believed me. Some did not. I did not campaign. Campaigns are for people who need a crowd to know they exist. Patel visited when allowed. He spoke in numbers. Numbers were love in his dialect. He said Brent bought a boat. I said, of course he did. Thieves like horizontal status. He said the civil freeze is coming. I said, then I can wait without rotting. There was a night I almost requested the visit, not for Brent, for the child I remembered at 6 holding a toy truck. I wrote the request and tore it up. The 6-year-old is not the man who cuffed me with paper. I will not let nostalgia launder a crime. When the appeal turned, I did not cheer in the unit. Cheering makes you a target and a story. I sat on my bunk and breathed like Helen taught me before board meetings, in for 4, hold, out for 6. Then I wrote one line in the notebook, Helen, the hand was not mine, and now a machine agrees. Release day clothes feel like costumes at first. The air outside smelled like wet asphalt and freedom and fear. Patel's folder was heavier than the duffel. I asked him to drive past the old warehouse. The sign still said Lane. For a minute I hated my own name on metal. Then I decided the name could be cleaned. Names are not the same as the people who stain them. Brent's loss did not restore my years. Nothing restores years. It restored the record. Sometimes the record is the only resurrection available. There is more I need to say about the warehouse years, because 2 years is not a headline. It is a climate. Winter in the unit smells different from summer. Summer is sweat and short tempers. Winter is coughs and letters that arrive slower. I turned 57 on a Tuesday with a cookie that was more symbol than sugar. Diaz said, "Happy birthday, old man. Do not die before your lawyer finishes." I said, I will not give Brent the easy ending. I kept a list titled Things Helen would hate. She would hate that Brent used a pregnancy loss as a stage. She would hate that I almost took a deal. She would hate the boat. She would not hate my refusal of visits. Helen understood theater. She walked out of bad plays. When the civil judgment stacked, Patel asked if I wanted a press statement. I said, no. Paper is louder than microphones when paper is true. He almost smiled. Almost as his smile. After release, I drove to the cemetery alone with flowers that looked too bright for my hands. I told Helen everything in order, like a report. Arrest. Refusal. Audit. Expert. Folder. Brent crying on a schedule. Then I said, I am tired. And I am free. And I am still angry in a clean way. Clean anger is useful. Dirty anger makes you Brent. I sleep with the window cracked now. I need proof of weather. If you are mid-fight and people tell you to just forgive for your health, ask them who benefits from your rushed forgiveness. If the answer is the person who framed you, take another month. Take another year. Time was the weapon. Time can also be the cure. My name is Arthur Lane. My son sent me to prison for 2 years. I refused every visit. The day I walked out, the life he stole walked into a courtroom and did not walk back to him. This is a family revenge story written in time. If you need strength for a long fight, take mine for an hour. Subscribe for more drama stories of quiet justice. Comment, could you refuse the visits, or would you have faced him sooner?